there's been a few casting mistakes. Now, the actor, on the day we were going to do it, been in the script, yes, I think it's disgusting too. I think it's absolutely horrible. And basically, rather than saying, fuck off.
You think you know Time Bandits as Terry Gilliam's whimsical children's adventure through history? But the real journey was a nightmare voyage through medieval chaos, financial disaster, and psychological breakdown. Craig Warnock, David Rappaport, and Sean Connery weren't just traveling through time. They were surviving a production so dangerous and chaotic that it nearly destroyed everyone involved. What you're about to uncover will astound you. A former Python animator whose perfectionist obsessions drove him to madness, an 11-year-old child actor thrown into genuinely perilous situations, and a Beatle whose film investment became a financial gamble that could have ruined his fortune. The time machine was imaginary, but the terror was absolutely real. Terry Gilliam, director, co-writer. Terry Gilliam's leap from Monty Python's resident animator to feature film director was more than career evolution. It was a desperate escape from comedy into serious artistic territory that nearly cost him his sanity. But what most audiences never realized was that Gilliam's obsessive pursuit of visual perfection masked deep insecurities about proving himself worthy of respect outside Python's collaborative safety net. Gilliam's most dangerous characteristic as a director was his complete inability to accept compromise or limitation. Where other filmmakers adapted their visions to budget constraints or safety concerns, Gilliam demanded that reality bend to accommodate his imagination. This inflexibility created constant crises as crew members struggled to achieve impossible effects with 1981 technology and medieval locations that hadn't been designed for film equipment. The transformation from animator to live-action director revealed Gilliam's fundamental misunderstanding of human limitations. In animation, every element could be controlled and perfected through endless revision. But directing actors, especially children, required flexibility and improvisation that went against Gilliam's obsessive nature. Cast members reported that he would demand dozens of takes for simple scenes, pushing performers beyond exhaustion in pursuit of visual moments that existed only in his mind. But here's what shocked even his Python colleagues. Gilliam's mental state deteriorated dramatically during production, as the gap between his imagination and practical reality became insurmountable. He began suffering panic attacks, insomnia, and periods of rage that terrified crew members. Michael Palin later described visiting the set and finding Gilliam completely unhinged, talking to himself about impossible camera angles and complaining that physics was conspiring against his artistic vision. Gilliam's research into historical periods became another obsession that delayed production and inflated costs. He demanded absolute accuracy in medieval armor, weapons, and architecture, even though the film was pure fantasy. This perfectionism meant that every location required extensive modification and every costume needed custom creation, turning a children's adventure into an expensive historical epic. Craig Warnock. Kevin 11-year-old Craig Warnock's casting as Kevin represented one of children's cinema's most demanding roles. But the secrets behind his experience reveal a young performer thrown into genuinely dangerous situations with minimal protection or psychological support. Warnock wasn't just acting in a fantasy film. He was surviving a production that treated child safety as secondary to artistic vision. Warnock's most traumatic experiences involved stunts that would be considered unthinkable by modern standards. The famous sequence where Kevin falls through various historical periods required him to perform actual falls from significant heights onto mattresses that provided minimal protection. British health and safety regulations for child actors were far less stringent in 1981, allowing Gilliam to expose Warnock to risks that would horrify contemporary productions. The psychological impact on Warnock was equally severe. Spending months surrounded by adult actors playing violent historical figures while being directed by an increasingly unstable perfectionist created trauma that affected his development long after filming ended. Warnock later described feeling like a prop in someone else's fever dream, unable to distinguish between the fantasy adventure and genuine fear. But here's what devastated child welfare advocates. Warnock's parents were largely absent during filming, leaving an 11-year-old to navigate complex adult personalities and dangerous situations without adequate support. The production hired tutors for his education but provided no psychological counseling or emotional guidance, treating his mental health as irrelevant compared to his performance quality. The most heartbreaking aspect of Warnock's experience was his realization that the magical adventure promised by the script was actually grueling work in uncomfortable conditions. The medieval costumes were heavy and restrictive, the castle locations were cold and damp, and the constant retakes meant spending entire days performing the same actions, while adult actors grew increasingly irritated with each repetition. David Rappaport and the Little People cast. David Rappaport's leadership of Time, Bandits' ensemble of Little People actors represented a breakthrough moment for performers who had been limited to stereotypical roles, but the secrets behind their preparation reveal artists fighting to maintain dignity while working in a genre that typically exploited their physical differences for cheap laughs. Rappaport, already an established stage actor, understood that Time Bandits offered unprecedented opportunity to portray complex characters rather than fairy tale creatures. His most challenging task was guiding fellow Little People performers who had limited acting experience, helping them develop the confidence needed to hold their own alongside established stars like Sean Connery and John Cleese. The physical demands placed on the Little People cast were extraordinary and dangerous. Medieval sword fighting, horseback riding, and action sequences designed for average-height performers had to be modified for actors whose physical limitations created genuine safety concerns. Rappaport insisted on performing his own stunts despite the increased risk, arguing that authenticity was essential for the character's credibility. But here's what shocked the production team. Rappaport's perfectionism rivaled Gilliam's own obsessive standards. He demanded extensive rehearsal time for sword fighting sequences, studied medieval warfare tactics, and insisted that his character's leadership be portrayed through competence rather than comic relief. This dedication elevated the entire Little People ensemble, transforming potential sidekicks into genuine protagonists. The most tragic aspect of the Time Bandits experience was how it affected the cast members' subsequent careers. While the film provided visibility and artistic respect, several actors struggled with typecasting and limited opportunities afterward. Rappaport himself battled depression and substance abuse before his tragic suicide in 1990, partly stemming from frustration over the industry's continued inability to see Little People as serious, dramatic performers. Sean Connery, King Agamemnon / The Fireman. Sean Connery's decision to appear in Time Bandits baffled industry insiders who couldn't understand why James Bond would risk his reputation on an experimental children's film, but the secrets behind his involvement reveal an actor seeking artistic redemption after years of commercial typecasting that had left him creatively frustrated. Connery's attraction to the dual role stemmed from his fascination with Gilliam's approach to heroism, which subverted traditional masculine archetypes. As King Agamemnon, he could embody classical nobility, while his modern fireman represented everyday heroism without the baggage of secret agent sophistication. This duality appealed to Connery's desire to explore different facets of authority and protection. The most surprising aspect of Connery's performance was his genuine affection for Craig Warnock, whose vulnerability reminded him of his own son. Connery became fiercely protective of the young actor, intervening when Gilliam's demands seemed excessive and ensuring that Warnock received proper breaks between takes. This paternal instinct informed both his character's relationships with Kevin, creating authentic emotional connections that transcended the script. Connery's preparation for Agamemnon involved extensive research into ancient Greek warfare and leadership philosophy. He studied classical texts, learned authentic fighting techniques, and worked with historians to understand how ancient kings balance authority with wisdom. This scholarly approach surprised crew members accustomed to Connery's more instinctive acting style in action films. The most revealing secret was Connery's growing frustration with Gilliam's chaotic direction, which clashed with his preference for efficient professionalism. Connery had thrived under directors who provided clear guidance and respected actors' time, but Gilliam's perfectionist indecision and constant revisions tested his patience severely. leading to several heated confrontations that nearly caused him to abandon the production. John Cleese and Michael Palin, Robin Hood and Vincent. The reunion of Python alumni, Cleese and Palin in Time Bandits represented more than nostalgic casting. It was Gilliam's attempt to inject Python's anarchic sensibility into children's cinema while proving he could direct his former colleagues as employees rather than collaborators. Cleese's portrayal of Robin Hood as a bureaucratic do-gooder obsessed with wealth redistribution policy rather than romantic adventure perfectly captured Python's gift for deflating heroic legends through administrative absurdity. His preparation involved studying socialist economic theory and medieval taxation systems, approaching the role with academic seriousness that made the comedy more pointed. Palin's Vincent represented innocence corrupted by violence, a romantic idealist trapped in brutal medieval reality. His research into courtly love traditions and troubadour poetry informed a performance that balanced genuine sweetness with underlying tragedy, showing how romantic notions crumbled when confronted with actual warfare. The most fascinating dynamic was how their Python friendship complicated Gilliam's directorial authority. Cleese and Palin were accustomed to collaborative creative processes where everyone contributed ideas, but Gilliam demanded strict adherence to his vision without input from actors. This tension created awkward moments where former equals had to navigate new hierarchical relationships. Their improvisation skills, honed through years of Python sketches, often rescued scenes when Gilliam's overplanned sequences fell apart. Several of their most memorable moments were spontaneous reactions to production chaos, demonstrating how comedy expertise could salvage artistic disasters through professional adaptability and mutual trust. George Harrison's handmade films. George Harrison's decision to finance Time Bandits through his Handmade Films company represented one of rock music's most unusual ventures into cinema. But the secrets behind his investment reveal a Beatle whose spiritual interests and artistic curiosity led him into financial territory that nearly bankrupted his post-music career. Harrison's initial attraction to the project came from his fascination with Eastern philosophy and time travel concepts that resonated with his interest in consciousness and reality's malleable nature. He saw Gilliam's script as exploring themes of enlightenment and material attachment that aligned with his own spiritual journey, making the investment feel like supporting meaningful art rather than commercial entertainment. The financial reality proved far more terrifying than Harrison anticipated. Gilliam's perfectionism and production delays caused costs to spiral beyond original budgets, forcing Harrison to mortgage personal assets to complete filming. Several times, production nearly shut down when funds ran out, requiring Harrison to make emergency decisions about whether to abandon his investment or risk financial ruin. Harrison's hands-off approach to creative control created unique problems when his money ran low, but artistic decisions continued driving up expenses. Unlike traditional producers who might demand changes to protect their investment, Harrison remained committed to Gilliam's vision even when it threatened his financial security. The distribution challenges proved equally daunting. Major studios were baffled by a surreal children's film that included death, violence, and philosophical complexity, making it difficult to market to traditional family audiences. Harrison found himself personally selling the film to reluctant distributors, using his Beatles reputation to convince skeptical executives that experimental cinema could find audiences. Production chaos in medieval locations. The decision to film Time Bandits in authentic medieval locations across Britain created logistical nightmares that transformed Gilliam's artistic vision into a survival ordeal for cast and crew. These weren't sound stages designed for modern equipment. They were ancient structures that actively resisted contemporary filmmaking technology. Castle locations lacked basic amenities like electricity, heating, or proper access roads, forcing crews to carry heavy equipment up narrow stone staircases and through doorways designed for much smaller medieval people. The authentic architecture that provided visual authenticity also created genuine danger, with uneven floors, low ceilings, and crumbling stonework that caused numerous injuries. British weather became a constant antagonist, destroying elaborate costumes and makeup with sudden downpours that could ruin entire days of filming. The medieval costumes, while historically accurate, provided no protection against cold and dampness, leaving actors shivering in armor while Gilliam demanded multiple takes of outdoor scenes. Special effects sequences without computer graphics required practical solutions that bordered on madness. The famous fortress explosion was achieved through controlled demolition that showered actors with actual debris, while time portal effects involved elaborate mechanical contraptions that frequently malfunctioned during crucial moments. The budget overruns caused by location challenges and weather delays created a cascading crisis where each problem spawned additional expenses. Equipment rentals extended far beyond projected schedules, catering costs multiplied as shooting days expanded, and accommodation. Accommodation expenses for the large cast and crew accumulated into financial catastrophe that threatened the entire production's completion. Time Bandits proved that the greatest adventures happen when visionary madness meets impossible odds. Gilliam didn't just make a fantasy film, he survived one, creating magic from absolute chaos. Subscribe to uncover more incredible secrets from cinema's wildest productions.